people do have a svara that were zoomed out, but I think that for the opportunity of learning Torah together on an Erev Rosh Hashanah, I think it's amazing. I actually want to start. I want to go down to business directly. I want to start with the personal story. Some of you might have heard. Once we go over so many years of Chevra, it's very hard to identify. When I said the story, when I didn't. So if you heard the story, hopefully it's going to be worth something anyway. So listen, this is what the story. It goes back to 21 years ago, September 11th, 2001. I was actually in Teaneck, New Jersey on a Tuesday morning. I get picked up by one of my close Talmidim. He's on his way to the city. I had a meeting in the city, and I got a ride with him together. Then I guess the yeshiva wasn't cool enough to rent cars for all the rabbeim, and I got a ride with him into the city. He was going through checking a property of his in Jersey City. We get off the turnpike. I'm on the phone with Rabbi Fold. For those of you that are still from Rabbi Fold's days, I'm on the phone with Rabbi Fold. Rabbi Fold talking about some Talmud who did something terrible in yeshiva. We're discussing the situation. As I'm on the phone with him, I tell him, Yona, you're not going to believe this, but I'm looking right now at the Twin Towers, and one of the buildings is smoking on the top. We put on 10-10 winds. They started reporting that something went wrong. There was some sort of fire. Nobody really had any real reports. While I'm on the phone with him, I actually visualized the second plane going to the second building. And I turned to the person next to me who was driving me to Talmud, and I said, okay, let's listen to the news. It was Mamish Maradik. Nobody knew what was going on, as you guys all know. Obviously, the rest is history. And I turned to him right away as the Israeli, after I heard the president speak for the first time. I said, please take me to the closest airport. I want to get out of this country. Nobody knows what's going on here. And, we started going. It was tremendous traffic. And obviously, by then, Newark Airport was closed. My flight from Wednesday night was canceled. I was able to get on the Motzei Shabbos flight and make it back to Eretz Yisrael right before Rosh Hashanah. But something I want to connect to that relates in my mind dramatically, specifically to Rosh Hashanah, not to the overall Yomim Narayim, is something that I think is very interesting. Because my feeling was, at that point, the great United States of America was brought to its knees by a bunch of hoodlums that are living on camels in some sort of desert. And I was convinced 100% that the United States of America, in terms of its population, in terms of its hashkafa, is going to go into a complete state of depression. I don't mean financial depression right now. Obviously, that's true too. But I meant to say psychological depression, this attitude, we are the great, we are the best, and look what happened by a few people that run the world from the desert. That was my hasaga. I don't know if you guys remember, I'm sure many of you do, but exactly the opposite happened. The movement in the community became dramatically, but I mean dramatically, patriotic. Baseball players, when they started playing baseball again, saw the flag of the United States on their clothes. There was no concept of not singing the national anthem. People were with flags all over the place. And Mamish, there was a dramatic connection to what I felt to be totally illogical. It doesn't make any sense. If anything, it should be Ibcha. It should be the contrary. Why now? Why is there such an excitement and connection to the United States of America? Didn't make any sense. And the environment was terrible. The amount of people, they started assuming tens of thousands, then they went down to a few thousand. But the amount of people, lo aleinu, and the tragedies was so dramatic. And yet the inner core of American patriotism really expressed itself and became so special. It didn't make any sense to me. I was like blown out of my brains. I couldn't hop it. What did we just see? What is going on here? Look at this, the biggest terrorist attack in world history in the central location in Kodesh HaKodashim of corporate America. And instead of us, the Americans, feeling anava, suddenly there was an explosion of this feeling and this emotion of the United States, freedom. We got to go fight the world to prove what we really represent, the United States and its freedom. I get on a flight on Motzei Shabbos. I go through security. You guys can't imagine what security in Newark Airport looked at Motzei Shabbos. It was mind-blowing. Rav Shurin and his wife, Rav Shurin used to teach in Mevaseret, close to 30 years ago, maybe 30 years ago already today. He's a grandson of Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. His wife had a shaitel comb. I don't know if any of you guys know what a shaitel comb looks like, but it's got metal teeth in the front, like 4 metal teeth. They confiscated a shaitel comb. They were afraid that she's going to kidnap the plane with a shaitel comb. It was shugana what was going on in the airport that day. You could just imagine. And everybody got onto that plane in the conversation, etc. We landed in Eretz Yisrael Sunday night. I don't remember when Rosh Hashanah was. I think it was Wednesday night that year. And as we land the plane, it suddenly hits me. And I was so excited. I got my vard for before Kios. It all fell into place. And this is the concept. Maybe the biggest question in Rosh Hashanah on a basic Avodas Hashem level, how do we balance these two Yesodos together? How do we balance Hamlachas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the experience of Hamlachas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the excitement of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being the Melech, together with at least me being a litzvak of the feeling of what Yom Adin represents? And if we look at the Nusach HaTfilos, it's totally manic depressive. The whole environment is a manic depressive environment. And in the halacha, we have this concept too. Is Rosh Hashanah mutar b'tainis? Is Rosh Hashanah asur b'tainis? These are all conversations that we have in a very serious way. When we look at Tamei Kios, when we look at the reason of the Kios, also we see some Tamei Kios which talk about Hamlachas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and one just sticks out. Hayishma kol shofar ba'ir v'yam lo yichradu. Is it possible that we blow a shofar in the city and we're not all shaking? So again, the emotion of Rosh Hashanah is an emotion which for years I didn't know how to connect to. Am I going in trembling with the Ema Sadin, with the fear of the din? Am I going in dancing? Hamelech ba'sadeh, karuni b'yotei karov. How do we really relate to these two Yesodos together? And it hit me something very dramatic. And I want to try to connect again to the story, to tap into it, to be able to, through that, segue into my experience of Yom Noraim ever since. In some very profound way, when a person or when a community hit pit bottom, then there's a process of trying to connect to something bigger and greater than my own individual struggles. And I think psychologically, again, I'm sure there's a lot of studies out there in retrospect, 21 years later. I never read any of them, so I'm just going to give you my feeling. I'm sure that as a community, it was devastating. Of course it was devastating. We were mamish in a tremendous mashber. It was scary. It was mamish brought down to a situation where in Achinami, we were brought to our knees. But Yachad Im Zot, at that point, there was a question of connecting to something more meaningful and more profound. And my understanding is that maybe that is the process. In other words, maybe in the avoda of Rosh Hashanah, and now that we started the Yemei Harachamim V'Aslichos, or the Yemei Aslichos, the Yemei Harachamim already from before, but maybe now the essence of the din is really coming and saying, Me'anu, Mechayenu, Mechazdenu, Man Omar Lefanecha Yoshev Marom, meaning the understanding and the experience that we're going through a process of a Yom Adin, which maybe we don't have a chance to be Omed, meaning I'm not going to get extremely litvak on you and really say, clearly we don't have a chance, but maybe we don't have a chance to be Omed in this din. And in Achinami, that drives us to a process of trying to connect to something more meaningful and more profound, which gives us the ability to connect to Amlach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So my ability to really go through the Mahalach of Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, is not just a Melech Basadeh in terms of the context of connecting to the Melech outside, but it's with the ability, or the Melech Basadeh in my backyard, but it's the ability to really understand that by me going through the Yesodus of the Yom Adin, I'm able to really reach the Madrega of Amlach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Over the years, it became clear to me that this concept is really maybe a Yesod HaYesodos in Rosh Hashanah, and maybe Rosh Hashanah representing the Hayom Harat Olam, the beginning of the individual's Amlach HaKadosh Baruch Hu, meaning making HaKadosh Baruch Hu my Melech in this Yesod. The Rav, so often, in so many of the essays, in his own essays that he wrote himself, actually touches this Yesod so fundamental. Meaning, in my whole build, in my Avodas Hashem, I have to first go through a process of achna. I first have to understand that I am surrendering. Meaning, it's not that I have the kalim to constantly chop and understand. It's not that I have the ability to really make it all make sense and have it all fit into place and really work it all out and work all the details out. But rather, in Achinami, I understand that I'm human, and in the mere fact that I'm human, I understand the limitations that I have. Umimela, in those Yesodos, I'm able to really realize that my hachna, my surrender, is what's going to really drive me to my ability to Amlach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If I come out of this without understanding, without realizing that my kalim are, limited and defined, then I'm not able to really reach that pinnacle and that point and that height of Amlach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And maybe that's exactly the same process that I spoke about in the beginning. I want to drive this one step further. Maybe one of the profound expressions of this concept, or maybe even a dialect on this concept, is in Kibbanim, im Ka'avadim, the Avinu Malkeinu experience. Now, again, we all understand that there are times that we're banim, times we're avadim. Again, machlokas, Rabbi Yehuda, Rameir, and the Sugim Masechet Kedushin Daf Lamed Vav. But that being said, when are we banim and when are we avadim? And then we have the tefillah of im Kibbanim, im Ka'avadim. I would like to suggest that the only way possibly to reach this yesod of banim atem Hashem Lokechem, again, without getting into machlokas Rabbi Yehuda and Rameir, is by accepting the fact that I'm first an Eved. And if I'm accepting the fact that I'm first an Eved, and I accept the absolute hachna, at that point, I'm able to be mamlich HaKadosh Baruch Hu on myself and really get to that profound level of banim atem Hashem Lokechem. Even though the tefillah starts the other way around, maybe that's the yesod of the suggestion. Meaning, if I go through the process of realizing that I'm willing to be mamlich HaKadosh Baruch Hu on me, meaning Kabbalah Sol Malchut Shamayim, which is Kriyat Shema, then I'm able to be Somech Gula Tefillah and start with Shmoneh Esrei, where in Shmoneh Esrei I'm entering the Tefillah as a ben of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruch Atah Hashem, meaning I'm entering the Tefillah as a ben of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is the yesod in the relationship. So it's somehow the balance of the two. I want to add on one more piece by Rav Kook about something else that had to do with this week's parsha, and then really connect it in to an aspect in my Avodas Hashem, and then I'll hand the floor over to Rav Isaacson Shlita, who's already on, I see. So I'm just gonna put a comment. Rav Kook has a very interesting concept about Vidu Maestros that we saw in this past week's parsha. Rav Kook says that we often think that Vidui is always negative. I'm clapping al chait. I'm going in and saying al chait on the averis that I did. Says Rav Kook, we have a very interesting yesod here in Vidui Maestros, that here I'm coming to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and saying I was good. Meaning I'm not just coming to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and saying for the chatayim I'm clapping al chait, but I'm also saying a vidui in the context of having the ability to stand in front of the Shekhinah and coming in and saying HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I was good. I also did that which was right. So I just want to add that on a little bit as a yesod, maybe bring Yom Kippur into this discussion. Maybe that's also the same balance in the process. Meaning there is a concept of vidui, so let's not lose the concept of vidui, which needs the akar sachet and the ability of me identifying my chisronos and my chatayim. But I have to also come with the aspect of saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the arti HaKodesh v'nabayit, meaning I did what I was supposed to. It's not only that I did not do what I was supposed to, but I did what I was supposed to. And in my mind, that's a little bit of the balance of Banim Ka'avodim, Banim Da'avodim, and it's a little bit of the yesod of this concept of Rosh Hashanah. So in Achinami, we have this dialect of Yom Adin on one hand and Amlachas HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the other. One has the potential to lead to the other. If I'm Mamlich HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or if I go through the Yom Adin, I'm able to be Mamlich HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But then I'm even able to go one step further, not just to be Mamlich HaKadosh Baruch Hu as an Eved, maybe Mamlich HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a Ben, and therefore not just go ahead and say Al Chet in the context of Hashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, but also of Vidui Maestros, which is Bi'arti HaKodesh V'nabayit, V'lo Netativ, etc., meaning I did what I was supposed to, not only I did not do what I'm able to do. Mimelo also maybe connects, if I go through that process, to the build of Yom Norayim. I'd like to take this opportunity to wish everyone a K'tiva V'chatima Tova, a Shana Tova, Be'ezrat Hashem, a Shana of Geula, Geula Yishid, personal Geula, Geula of Klal Yisrael, Be'ezrat Hashem, and Shkayach again for Rav Hershel for putting this together, and Shkayach again for each and every one of you taking out your time and learning Torah together with us. Be'ezrat Hashem, we should be zocheh to shout out and scream Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimloch, Le'olam Va'ed, and Shkayach again, and woo! Hatzlacha Rahava to all